I love this thing because I can just hit the record button and it's got a little tally light so I know it's actually recording. Hey, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at another new lens. This is the Tamron 20mm f2.8 Di3 OSD M1-2 for Sony E-mount covering full frame. That is quite a mouthful of a lens name, but what you need to know, the salient facts from all of that information, is that this is a 20mm f2.8 prime lens for Sony E-mount. So in the last video I did, we talked about the Sony 20mm f1.8 G lens, and in that video I referenced a lot of alternate lenses, or I would talk about some alternatives, but I didn't end up really talking about alternatives because after I said that I realized there are actually quite a lot of alternatives to that lens on the E-mount system currently. So I ended up just talking about one being the 24mm G Master f1.4. So this is actually kind of like in the opposite direction in terms of budget. This is currently selling for $300 in comparison to the Sony, which is $900. So this is 1/3 the price of the Sony. There are obviously a lot of compromises when you are spending $300 versus $900. Just taking a look at the physical aspects of the lens, it is very small, very lightweight. It is 220 grams or 7.8 ounces versus 373 grams for the Sony, 373 grams or 13.2 ounces. So super lightweight, very compact, kind of the short little squat thing. There are absolutely no physical buttons or switches on the lens. The only control you have is just the focus ring. So as bare bones as it could possibly be. The build quality is just plastic, you know, just straight up plastic. It's got a metal mount, which you would expect, and also surprisingly it has a rubber gasket for weather sealing. I was surprised to see that on this lens. You'll notice that it is, you know, this is only an f2.8, so for a prime lens it's actually pretty slow, and as a result you can see how small the glass element is on it, and that goes a long way to explain just the small size and overall lightweight compactness of this lens. The reason that it has kind of, you know, a wider housing is that Tamron is prioritizing standardization across their whole Sony lineup of lenses. So all of their lenses for Sony E-mount have the same front filter diameter of 67mm. So if you want to buy into the Tamron system, you're really going to only have to buy like one set of filters. You know, if you don't have to worry about different filters or doing stepping rings or anything or that. So like I mentioned, there's no physical controls on this lens whatsoever, just the focus ring. And the focus ring is also plastic. It looks like it might be rubber. It's kind of got this matte finish that is reminiscent of rubber, but it's definitely just a molded plastic. Just not overall a very premium or high quality feeling lens. I mean, it's well designed, and I would imagine that it's well constructed, but it's a far cry from, you know, a $900 G lens from Sony. So I wanted to compare, just kind of talk about the lens while we're shooting on the lenses themselves, so we can just kind of get a quick side-by-side comparison between them, like how they perform in this situation, just kind of a YouTube talking head thing. Right off the bat with this lens, it has really bad barrel distortion, but it has built-in corrections, so you go into the camera and turn on the lens distortion compensation and it'll straighten that out. In the box, you essentially just get the lens, you get the front cap, the rear cap, and the pedal style hood. Some other specifications to note about the lens. Like I said, it's got a really close focusing distance of 11 centimeters or 4.3 inches in comparison to the Sony, which is 19 centimeters. I don't know how many inches that is, but it's more than 4.3. This has a 7-bladed diaphragm for the aperture. In comparison, the Sony has 9-bladed. So you should probably get a smoother out of focus rendition on the Sony. Another thing to note about the lens is focus by wire. This is an accelerated based focus by wire system. In comparison, the Sony is a linear focus by wire system. So if you have any aspirations to do manual focus for video, this lens is going to be not ideal in that situation. So I've touched on focus by wire system in other videos, particularly talking about the Lumix 12-35, which has the same acceleration based focus by wire system. So just to reiterate one more time, what that means is that, so if you turn it, like if you do like a short and fast movement, regardless of how far you turn it, the fact that you turn it fast means that it's going to jump further in distance across the focusing plane. Whereas if you turn it slow, it's just going to kind of creep along the focusing plane. So it's just not, you can never really know how, you just kind of have to hunt around until you find the focus. So if you don't, if you're, setting up something like this for YouTube and just doing this kind of talking head demonstration type situation, the autofocus is probably going to be fine for that. Likewise, the manual focus will be fine. If you're not moving a lot, you can just set the manual focus because you're not having to rack focus or anything like that. So for certain situations, it'll be perfectly adequate. And if your primary concern or primary focus is photography, you're more likely going to be utilizing the great autofocus performance and not really worrying about manual focus anyway. And I will say, even though this is a louder autofocus motor than the Sony, it's still very fast and responsive. So for photography, it's not really a big deal that it's loud. If you're photographing like a golf event or something, or a wedding, or I don't know, then you might not want it to be loud, but it's not that loud. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and switch out this lens for the Sony, and then we can just take a look at how it looks. All right, so to start off with, we have the lens compensation for distortion turned off, and right off the bat, you can probably see how badly barrel distorted it is. It's like the image is just wrapped around the lens element, very fisheye-like. If you are doing photography primarily, you'll get the benefit of the distortion compensation in camera, but you'll also get the additional benefit of distortion corrections or lens corrections in your editor. So whether that's Photoshop or Lightroom or some other editor, they're going to have built-in corrections supplied by Tamron that are going to straighten out all the edges even more. So yeah, I just did a review of this lens. There's really no need to go back over it, but just to kind of talk about it in terms of in comparison to the Tamron, just how much more robust feeling it is, how many more features it has, just the additional weight. It's not a heavy lens, it's only 373 grams, but definitely feels like a more solid, higher quality lens, as you would expect for the price. It's not a big lens either, very small and compact, but just has a better feel than the Tamron. Of course, you get a weather sealing gasket like the Tamron, even though this one's a little bit thinner. So they both have the same front filter diameter of 67 millimeters, but you can see how the Sony, let's see if we can focus here. The glass element is much bigger in the Sony because it's a 1.8 versus a 2.8 on the Tamron. Like I said before, the Tamron has a really close focusing distance, so it should be able to focus closer than this, but we'll see. So we'll just try to wrap this up quickly here, talk about who this lens is for. It's marketed towards first-time photographers, so Tamron knows that this is a cheaper budget-oriented lens. I think the focus by wire system being accelerated is not good for video shooters. So if you're a vlogger or if you're a YouTuber and you're not really worried about manual focus, then it's kind of a moot point. If you're a photographer primarily, then the manual focus also, and the focus by wire isn't, or the accelerated focus by wire isn't really an issue for you. Distortion performance of the lens isn't that great. Even with the compensation turned on, you still get a little bit of distortion for video. For photography, it's going to be less of an issue because the software is going to take care of any remaining distortion. So for me, it's way worth it. Even though this is 3 times as expensive as the Tamron, this is a way better lens. It's more comfortable to use. There's more features on it. It's easier to use. Feels better. And I feel like all those kind of tangibles and intangibles are worth spending the money on. There's a lot of options, but if you really can't afford it, if you really are kind of maxed out at around 300 bucks, it's not a bad lens by any means. It's gonna do, it's gonna get the job done for you, but it's not gonna be like exceptional. I would say for photography, it's probably a better buy. For video, there's just way too many compromises or way too many missing features for me to justify it. So with that said, that's about it for this overview, just kind of quick comparison between these two lenses. If you've got any questions, you know what to do with them. Shove them up your ass. That's not nice. You can please write questions, comments, concerns, and I'll respond to them. Yeah, and feel free to like this video if you liked it. Feel free to subscribe, unsubscribe, whatever you feel like doing. Stay safe. Sorry if you've been looking at this nasty poison ivy on my arm. It's just poison ivy. It's going away. Okay, bye.